Hey guys, I'm Amber. Welcome to my channel. I still cannot believe that I'm sitting here recording my first trimester recap video. It still feels like very surreal. Like the first trimester went by slowly and quickly at the same time. I didn't actually want to do a whole first trimester recap. I wanted to do more like bi-weekly updates, and you will see as I continue with this, you will see why that did not happen. So yeah, let's just get right on into it. At this point, I'm actually 21 weeks pregnant, so well into the second trimester, and I've actually already posted a pregnancy video about the symptoms that I had before I got a positive pregnancy test. So I'll leave that in the description box if you want to check that out. Otherwise, let's just jump in. I have my notes. Thank goodness. That is one thing I was really good about, was keeping track of everything week by week. So starting with week 4, this was when I found out I was pregnant. I had a lot of the same symptoms that I had in my before my BFP video. So a lot of that's the same. Like I said, go check that out if you want to know what those were. Definitely was noticing a lot of intermittent cramping. And that's one that I saw a lot of other women talk about in their videos, but I don't know, it's just weird. Like you don't think, especially if it's your first pregnancy, like you don't really think about the fact that you're gonna feel like you're starting your period a lot. That was like one of the more worrisome symptoms. Like I texted one of my girlfriends who is actually pregnant with her second right now several times during the fourth week or week 4, and was like, is this normal? Are you sure? And she was like, yes, it's fine. So definitely intermittent cramping. I did notice pretty quickly that I had an aversion to anything sweet. For me, that is definitely not normal. I have a very big sweet tooth. So all of a sudden, I just didn't want anything sweet. I even like my morning cup of tea was too sweet, and I barely put any sugar in that at all. So I stopped drinking tea in the morning for a while, and I actually got like powdered bone broth. Like you put it in hot water and it's like bone broth, and that's what I started drinking in the morning for a little bit. So that actually leads me to the next symptom, which was that I was just craving like savory, warm, like soups, broths, anything like that. So I think in that first week, like I went and got pho a couple of times, and like I said, I replaced my morning tea for a little bit with a morning cup of bone broth. So that was kind of weird for me, but that's what I was doing. And the other symptom that I had pretty quickly was insomnia, and that one was probably the most annoying symptom just right off the bat, because I would go to bed and I felt tired, but then I just could not fall asleep. So that was fun. The next week, week 5, I actually remember this week pretty distinctly, even though it was a while back. I started noticing more bloating. Definitely was still getting cramps, but I wrote down that they were less frequent and much more mild, like really, really mild PMS type cramping. And I remember during this week that other than that, like I mostly felt fine. I really didn't feel pregnant at all. And it was weird. And that was actually kind of a scary week for me, because I definitely did feel a little bit different when I first found out during week 4. And then I would have thought that my symptoms would have kept like changing and intensifying, but instead it was kind of the opposite, where they were kind of starting to go away and I was starting to feel okay. So I was afraid that I was like losing it, or that things weren't progressing or something like that. But apparently it actually can be pretty normal for symptoms to fluctuate. And then of course, like you'll hear a lot of stories about women who felt completely fine for their entire pregnancy. So I was kind of nervous during week 5, but I just tried to, ignore it and move past it. During week 6, I noticed that my breasts were starting to feel a little bit more tender. I was starting to urinate a little bit more. That kind of like went away after I got my positive pregnancy test. It mostly depended on like if I was drinking a lot of water or not, but I did notice that it was kind of starting to come back a little bit more. Still craving soup, and other than soup, nothing was sounding good. So week 7, week 7 was like the beginning of a whole downward spiral for me. I wrote down that I have an unsettled feeling in my stomach, and like it wasn't quite like nausea, just kind of like when you eat something and it's just not sitting right with you. But I had that like throughout the day. I wrote down that I have way more aversions than cravings. Eating helps a little bit. And by the end of week 7, I put nauseous all day and nothing helps. So that is, like I said, kind of like the beginning of the end for me. During week 8, I wrote down tired, nauseous. This was the first week that I actually did get sick and threw up. And I remember it was actually the day that I told my boss that I was pregnant. I felt like I didn't want to tell him quite that soon, but I felt like I needed to because I was feeling so nauseous. And he was amazing. Like he was like fully supportive of me taking any time if I need to. And I told him, luckily I haven't actually gotten sick yet. And then it was that night that I got sick for the first time. I wrote down sensitive to smells, especially black pepper, the dishwasher, and Mrs. Meyer's lemon hand soap. Not anymore, we had Mrs. Meyer's lemon hand soap in one of our bathrooms, and I could not go in that bathroom at all because if Alex used the bathroom and then like washed his hands, that's all I could smell. And it's not like a hand soap that I don't like, but for whatever reason in this time of my life, I just cannot stand it. And I wrote down avocados are great. I don't remember that at all, but I guess avocados were doing it for me. Week 8 was also exciting, even though that was kind of when things started to go downhill for me. It was a very exciting week because that was when we had our first ultrasound appointment. I think it was week 8, right? Yes. So that was when we had our first ultrasound appointment, and we got to see the little baby for the first time. And I was very nervous going to that first ultrasound appointment because I don't know, I was worried that, I don't know why this sounds so unreasonable now, especially because I was experiencing all these different things, but I just had this fear of like, what if nothing is there? And that was probably my biggest fear. But the second that she put the little wand on my belly and the screen popped up, oh my gosh. And then you just see that little baby bean. I'll post a picture right here of what baby looked like at the first ultrasound. It just is insane to know that that little life is just growing inside of you. I mean, it was so surreal. So that was really exciting. And then they told us that everything looked pretty on point. That was when I got my due date of June 18th. And yeah, it was and then I got blood work done. Everything came back fine. That was also about the time that I started going back and forth about whether or not I wanted to go with my OB or if I wanted to start looking into a midwife. Another thing actually was during that week, once I saw baby, it started to feel more real. So that was when I bought the traditional what to expect when you're expecting book. I'm gonna liken that to pregnancy brain right now. I feel like I get my words jumbled all the time right now. And so if I say something weird, that's probably it. But I bought the What to Expect When You're Expecting book. And I have to say, I didn't actually end up finishing it. I think I read like the first few chapters. I didn't particularly like it. I would recommend if it's your first pregnancy, maybe actually like go to your local bookstore if you want to get a book and like flip through a few to make sure that whatever it is that they're talking about kind of like aligns with you and that you're going to actually be interested reading it. Because after a couple chapters, I was just like, I can't read this. Like this is not the only pregnancy book that I want to read. So put that one down. I did end up getting 2 other books, and that's exactly what I did is I went to a bookstore and I actually looked at them. So the first one I got is Bumpin', and this is by Leslie Schrock. Leslie Schrock. So I really liked this one. I've already finished it. I finished it like actually a few days ago. I really liked this one. I liked her tone. I don't know. It was just kind of more of an easy read for me. And I like that it felt a little bit more like up to date, even though the What to Expect books have like a ton of different revised versions. But I liked this one a lot more. Of course, like still consult with your care provider if you're gonna use this book as like kind of a guide as far as like decisions that you should be making. And the other book that I went and bought is Ina May's Guide to Childbirth. And I actually just started this one right after I finished Bumpin'. Oh my goodness. I'm not even a quarter of the way through. I'm on page 20. But I already can tell this is such a good book. The whole first half of it is just like positive birth stories. And I thought that was going to be like the part that I didn't like the most and that I would kind of just want to like get through, but I love it. And then the second half of it is more like her, I guess, tips and tricks for labor. And I want to say that she like explains and breaks down labor and birth as well. So those are the 2 books that I got pretty closely to when I had that first ultrasound. For week 9, I didn't really write down much. I wrote down still nauseous, and I had a dream that baby was a boy. At this point, I don't think that means anything because I've also had dreams that baby was a girl. But at the time, I was like, oh. During weeks 10 and 11, I actually didn't write down anything because this was around Thanksgiving time, and Alex and I were in California at my parents' house. And so definitely I can tell you I was very nauseous and I was absolutely getting sick almost every single day at this point, if not every single day. And during that time, the reason I didn't take down any notes is because I got a sinus infection and it like knocked me off my feet. Oh my gosh. It was so horrible. I couldn't sleep because I am just not a mouth breather. And so at night, the fact that I couldn't breathe through my nose, like it was so plugged up. I couldn't breathe through my nose. And so I just could not sleep. And so then the fact that I wasn't able to sleep made me feel even worse. So it was like I think like a week and a half, maybe even a little bit longer, that I was really, really sick. And of course, when you're pregnant, there's not a lot that you can take. And if you do take something, a lot of times your provider needs to like tell you what it is or prescribe it to you. I did take Tylenol because I had a fever. That went away like after one day. I think I only took like 2 doses and then it went away. The fever did come back like a week later, but then same thing. I think I took 1 dose and then it went away. But other than that, I was just using like saline solution in my nose to try to clear it up, and that barely worked. Like, I don't even know why I kept using it other than just like hanging on to hope that like this time it'll work. But I tried so many things. Like, I tried a humidifier. I tried this like old thing that my grandma used to have me do, where you like pour boiling water into a bowl and you stick your head not in the bowl but like over the bowl as the steam comes up, and then you put like a towel over your head to try to like kind of keep it all in there. And that didn't work. It was so bad. And I actually did end up going to urgent care. They told me that I either had the flu or, COVID. I don't know if you can say that on YouTube, but whatever. They told me I either had the flu or I was sick with COVID, and they tested me for both. I did not have either, and they wouldn't prescribe me anything. They told me that I needed to go to my OB. And my OB was the one that originally told me just go to urgent care. So I felt like I was not getting like very personalized care. It was at this point that I pretty much decided that I think I want to get a midwife instead of just going to an OB, because they are definitely known for more personalized and like in-depth care. Not to say that an OB is bad or that you can't get personalized care with an OB, but just that's kind of like a midwife trademark, I feel like. So I was sick for, weeks 10 and 11. During week 12, I wrote down vomiting, which, like I said, I was a lot. Started gagging at brushing my teeth, getting up. That sounds weird, but that was a thing where I would just like get up and get out of bed and I would start gagging for no reason. The dishes, the smell of our apartment hallway, that one still gets me. I have to plug my nose in our apartment hallway. And it's not because it smells bad. It just has like this smell of cleaner, and I don't know what it is. It just drives me insane right now. And then certain foods. So I have to shout out Alex, my husband, because during the first trimester, but especially like these weeks where I was just like nauseous and gagging at everything, he was amazing. Like, when I tell you that this man did everything, I am not exaggerating. He did the dishes, he went and got me food, he cooked, but more often than not, he went and got me food, because a lot of the time the smell of like cooking food was one of the things that made me feel sick. Everything, like laundry, he took care of the cat. Seriously, he just was like such a rock for me during this time. Like, I'm so grateful for him. So I also wrote down that I was slightly less nauseous. I don't remember that at all, to be honest, because the first trimester for me definitely is like characterized by vomiting and nausea, but that's what I wrote. I wrote down that I was feeling tired and that my clothes were starting to get tight. So at that point, I definitely remember I was kind of in like a, ooh, what do I do phase about my clothes, because they were starting to get tight, but I wasn't like really showing. And so I was kind of in that weird in-between phase of like, you're definitely too small for maternity clothes, but you don't really want to buy new clothes that will fit you at that point, because in like a month or so, they're not gonna fit you for sure. So I started just like leaving one button undone on my pants, or like the top button, I would just leave it undone. And for week 13, the last week of the first trimester, I wrote down that my appetite is coming back a little bit, that aversions were starting to subside. A craving that I had that week was salt and vinegar chips. I picked up a bag, I remember, on my way to work, and they just like hit the spot, and I ate the entire bag myself in like 2 to 3 days, which that's not really like me, but I did. And then I ended up buying like a couple more bags after that. And I think I kind of like overdid it, because then after a week or so, I like didn't want those at all. I wrote down almost no vomiting. So this is about when it started to subside a little bit. Honestly, I'll just give you a spoiler. It has not fully gone away, even where I'm at now. But towards the end of the first trimester, it did start to like taper off a bit. I was feeling occasionally nauseous, not all day anymore, and it was mostly at night, which was not fun, because it made it a little bit harder to go to sleep. And that is also when I noticed that I was starting to feel out of breath more easily. I think some people talk about the out of breath feeling like way sooner, but I definitely didn't start to notice that at all until the end of the first trimester. And honestly, it might be because I became like a professional couch potato during the first trimester. So I basically would get out of bed in the morning and immediately come sit down here, and I would stay here until almost the end of the day. So that could be why I didn't notice any feeling like, you know, of breathlessness, because I wasn't really doing anything, because I felt so sick all the time. So during week 13, I think that was about when I started to kind of like have a little more energy. I still didn't feel great, but I felt well enough to like get up and start making food and things like that. And yeah, I noticed that I would feel out of breath a lot faster. That is the first trimester for you. Hopefully that didn't scare anybody. It did get better, and I would do it all over again in a heartbeat, because I'm so excited to meet our little one. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss any future videos. And I will be filming more like bi-weekly pregnancy updates going forward. So the next one will probably come out in a week or two. So stay tuned for that, and I will see you next time. Bye.